Hey everybody, welcome back to Brick System Brothers. My name's Nathan Masters. Today I want to look at this horse. Yeah, looks like a Lego horse. It might be a Lego horse, but for a couple of reasons I think it's probably not a Lego horse, and that's what I want to go over today. First of all, about where this guy came from to my personal collection. This was part of a larger lot on eBay of some Lego horses from the early era. Remember, the first Lego horse with the specific mold was introduced in 1984, and in 2012 it got an update. So this horse follows the pattern of the original mold from that 1984 era, and the other horses in this lot from eBay were also part of that early edition of the horse. It didn't have any of the new ones, so at least in terms of the other parts of the collection that this came from, it was probably from that date range. One of the main reasons that I went ahead and bought it was for this item right here, this particular horse. Believe it or not, this is not the first one of these that I have seen. I've got a friend that has one of these as well, and when I first saw it, it looked a lot more like a one-off item to me, and I didn't really expect to see another one pop up, at least here in the US. But if it was a Lego prototype, those are much more common in Europe, in the Billund area specifically, because of the nature of the work that Lego did at their headquarters, where sometimes those proprietary items would make their way out of the factory. So potentially more likely to find something like this in Europe, not necessarily as much in America. But coming back to this horse in particular, from the first look, it is very, very similar to the same 1984 Lego horse. So let me put one of those up here side by side. Yeah, really the outline, the joint, there was only one joint on this horse, and that was the head. So that head could pivot down, which it does on both of these horses. Even the positioning of the legs with the outside and the inside, those are lined up as well. Overall, it's a very, very close copy, if not almost exact match of the original 1984 horse. But as I mentioned, the longer I looked at this, there are a couple of minor, very minute, but still noticeable differences. And they might be hard to actually catch on this camera because they are just that detailed. Probably the most obvious one that you could identify right away is the printing, and specifically the nature of the main printing. And the more you look at the printing on the main, you might notice that there is a slightly different pattern of triangles. First of all, the original Lego horse does not have any printing on the main. This isn't true for every color of horse. The brown horse actually did get some printing at one point. I think by 1986 they were adding some black printing to the mane of the brown horse. But look at the outline, the etching on the molding of the original Lego horse. And you'll see there's kind of these four main triangles, and they all have a little bit of a curve downward towards the shoulder. Now compare that to the outline of the mane on this horse. I think there's still those four main groups of triangles, but the outlining and the curvature is kind of random. It's not an exact match for the Lego horse. So that one would be one of the main differences I spotted first, just in terms of, maybe this is an early version, or maybe this is an indication that it is not actually originated by Lego. So I mentioned the brown horse having main printing. I'm not sure that the white one ever did. And another note on the color of the printing, we don't see a lot of this solid red printing on this kind of detail from Lego. Instead, we're going to see something more realistic like the brown color of the harness, and then actually two different colors of printing on this horse with the black detail on the eye and the harness again. So Lego actually going for a little bit more complexity when they decorate their horse piece compared to what this one is. Now, there is an argument to be made that in a prototype you would not see this level of complexity. You would instead see something more like this red outlining to make sure that all of the directions are lining up with your printing process. Like, you don't want to see a bunch of this red overflowing the molded lines of the mane. You want to make sure that the eye and the bridle look like they're in the right spot. So from a prototype standpoint, you might actually expect to see this solid red color on this kind of horse. So it's not necessarily an argument against this being a Lego prototype. In fact, it could actually be used to support that argument. But I did want to contrast it to an actual released Lego horse and possibly make it an argument against this being an early released version. So I don't think it was an early released version. That kind of just leaves it in the prototype stage. And this is where I want to bring in something that I found online to the discussion. I found this on an Instagram profile of this fellow right here, Francesco, and the handle is FRA_SPREA. This is still up as of today, so if you want to check this out on your own, you're welcome to. It's part of this post with the large map, and apparently Francesco was able to visit the Lego house in early March 2023 for the launch of the new pirate set, and this is referring to the brick-built pirate minifigure. Now, part of the launch of this at the Lego house event included a diorama of some early prototype work on the horse, and I haven't really seen this anywhere else online, so I do want to bring this into the conversation. As far as the question of what Lego horse prototypes look like, this is probably one of the most definitive pictures we're going to get to answer that question. And there is some interesting stuff to note here. Actually, one of the prototypes looked to be using some kind of modeling or molding clay around actual Lego pieces. They started with a base of a 2x4 plate and added some slope and some brick, and then tried to build around this. And then there's two other items here that are maybe further along in the process, where we actually see those two halves lined up, joined together, and some prototype red studs for the minifig mount point instead of something like this original Lego plate down in here. There's also a couple of differences between the molds themselves, just in terms of the tail, the head, and the detail on all of those. This one here in the front definitely looks like it's the furthest one along, with the visible main etching. Looks like there's maybe some marking or some coloring for the eye and the nose on here as well. The angle's a little hard to tell. And then also the tail detail and the split of the mold right down the middle. And that's really the only picture that we get of those horse molds. There is one other interesting thing here of this scaled up horse. Almost looks like it's maybe a metal version. So kind of difficult to tell here. This would be much further along in the process once a lot of details are finalized, and maybe just scaling things up to really get the detail finished out on the horse mold before it goes into launch. So between these two pictures, I think we do have quite a bit of insight into the prototype process of the Lego horse. Remember, this would have been before 1984, so possibly 82 and 83, a couple of years before the launch. These processes were going on, this work was going on to develop the Lego horse. And just looking at these, I don't know that there's a direct line that can be drawn from these prototypes to the horse that I have here today. Looking at the main detail specifically and going back to the curvature on those triangles, there's not really anything that looks exactly like what I have. And so as far as the prototype goes in this process, it would probably be the step after this horse. And I think at this point, the detail of the mane had already kind of evolved to the point where it was following that shoulder blade down instead of more of this random direction like we see on maybe a little bit on this old original version, but even there, I don't necessarily see anything that would be an exact match. Also notice the split line of the seam right down the center of these horses, and as I'll show you here in a second on the white horse that I've got, the split line actually follows the released version of the horse to the other side of the second stud. So I think with the support of this photo and some of the evidence of the prototyping process that Lego is doing, I don't necessarily see a direct link where this would be a prototype horse. Now that being said, there are a couple of other minor differences worth pointing out here before I want to look at one more thing I've got pulled up on the computer. And the first one would be the nostril. So actually there's two versions of this 1984 horse that I've got in white. And the other one that I haven't shown yet has a depressed hole for the nostril instead of just a dimple in the plastic. So we do have both of these to compare. The mystery horse just has the dimple. I'm actually not sure which one of these would be earlier, the one with the hole or with the dimple. I don't know that there's enough information out there to determine that. But that was a difference I spotted. And then, like I mentioned with the split line on the seam, the main body of the horse, it does follow along the center, but then once you get into the recess for the minifig mount, it kicks over to the side of the stud. And that is the case for the eventual released Lego horse and the mystery one that I've got here. A note on part markings, that's one of the first things you look for, is you look for the Lego logo and a part number on the item of question. In the case of the actual Lego horse, it's on the inside of the leg here, which is 44.94, and that's just lacking completely on this horse. And the actual Lego logo can be found as well on the inside of the stud, whereas on the mystery horse, not a whole lot there. In fact, the studs themselves are not really an exact match. So the inside diameter of the Lego stud is a certain dimension, and it can actually hold a 3.18 millimeter bar. It looks like the inside diameter of these mystery studs would not hold up to that standard, and it's a little bit more sloppy in terms of that overall dimensioning. So the next step was to see if I could find this horse in the realm of the copycat Lego items, the realm of the knockoffs. It didn't really look like I was having any headway on the prototype side, and the details that I did find on the horse prototype are not really pointing towards this mystery horse anymore. So what about the knockoff side? Well, I did find one blog post on this site called Reasonably Clever. Unfortunately, I don't think it is the same iteration of my horse, but it does provide another data point where we see a knockoff company that copied the 1984 Lego horse. And it looks like this was sometime before 2009, so this blog post was made in January 2009. This knockoff would have had to be made before that time. So yeah, a little later in this particular design's lifespan, I do think we have some evidence that there were other companies doing it. Maybe not an exact match for the horse that I've got, but there is this blog post out there that documents at least one toy. Even in this case, it's a pretty poor execution. The box packaging shows a white horse with two different color printing, and when it's opened up, the horse is actually red with a single color silver printing. So I still haven't found an exact match for this particular horse, but I did want to mention what I found from this blog post and put this link in with the video. Of course, when I bought the lot on eBay, I was hoping that potentially this could be part of the prototype horse story, but after reviewing some of the information I found online, I'm not really sure of that anymore. In fact, I'm leaning towards it being a knockoff or a copycat. But that's okay. I think it's still interesting, and it kind of was the reason that I was able to find that stuff about the development of the Lego horse in the first place. I don't know if I would have found that if I wasn't looking for it. So I did want to put that in the video and get that out there in discussion a little bit more. Also, if you've seen something that matches this guy before, even if it's a different color of printing, but it has that kind of difference in the mane, if you know where it came from, or even generally like the region that it came from, I think that would be interesting to add to the discussion, maybe narrow this down a little bit more in terms of the exact details of the origination of the mystery horse. So, who made this guy? Who do you think? Do you think it was a Lego prototype? Do you think it is a knockoff, copycat item? Just based on what I was able to find, I think it's probably a copycat. But it's not really a bad copycat. It's a pretty good quality one, especially to get the two halves to line up and still have the head functionality. I think that takes a little bit of tolerance, attention to detail, that kind of thing. But probably not Lego in my opinion. Anyways, thanks for watching today, guys. We'll see you next time on Brick System Brothers.